Hello everyone. So in this lecture we are going to discuss about a role of NGOs, environmental ethics and environmental protection acts in our country. Shall we go ahead? Okay. First we are going to discuss about NGO, that is non-governmental organization. So, what is NGO? That is non-governmental organization. In other words, it can be called as non-profit organizations. They expect any monetary benefit from the government. Purely, they are working on the service-oriented activities. So they assist the government in various ways to protect or to conserve the nature. They have various roles and responsibilities. They are promoting discussions and debates regarding the environment. They organize a national level seminar on various environmental protection program and promoting sustainable development. Yes, they are the forerunner in creating awareness among the people about the conservation of the environment and create awareness about the sustainable development and maintaining environmental quality. This is very important. How much of air pollutant should be in the air, and how much water pollutants are permitted. So those schemes, those datas are given to the government by these non-government organizations, sensitizing the policy makers about the local needs and priorities. They assist government for bringing new laws regarding the environmental protection. So whenever the new law about regarding the environment is brought into the parliament, so the government of India would definitely seek an opinion about opinion with these NGOs. So, say some NGOs I would like to share that are functioning in our country. The first one is SIPCO movement. SIPCO movement, also called SIPCO Andolan, the non-violent social and ecological movement by rural villagers. This program was started in the year 1973 in order to conserve the trees, particularly in the Himalayan trees. This movement was first started in Uttarakhand, in Uttar Pradesh. Later, this state, the Uttar Pradesh, was bifurcated into two, that is Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh. Now this state is called as Uttarakhand. This movement was started in Uttarakhand in 1973 to conserve the trees which are present in the Himalayas. Later, this was extended to the rest of our country. So this movement was started by the famous social activist Sundarlal Baguguna and Chandi Prasad Bhatt. Chandi Prasad Bhatt, he founded this organization, this movement, and Sundarlal Baguguna was the activist who played a vital role in this NGO. And next is Narmada Bacho Andolan. So this by Kalpavrig. This movement, Narmada Bacho Andolan, this movement was started by the social activist Medha Bhatkar. So I have already told you the Sardar Sarovar Dam, which was the biggest dam in our country, which provides irrigation and drinking water supply to 4 different states: Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Haryana. When the dam, the Sardar Sarovar Dam, while constructing, the foundation stone was laid by our first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, and the project was completed after a couple of years. I know, still there was an issue for sharing of the water between the states like Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan. Um, they framed a committee to look into this matter in 1950s, 1955 or 1956. They submitted a report. The government was not given a life to that report. In 1969, again the government was given to this project, was given life to this project. The government framed a committee to look into this matter, because during rainy season, large quantities of the water flows into the Arabian Sea without any use. But during summer season or drought situations, these countries are fighting to share the Sardar Sarovar Dam water. So 1969, the government set a committee to look into this matter. They submitted a report after 10 years. In 1979, they submitted a report. They proposed to construct many dams, many smaller dams, nearly 30 bigger dams, 135 smaller dams across the Narmada River. So when this project is implemented, the tribal people would be worst affected. Nearly 573 villages would be definitely submerged into the dam. So in order to protect the rights of the tribal people, this Narmada Bacho Andolan movement was started by Ms. Medha Bhatkar, and they are fighting against the government move. So another NGO, that is Bombay Natural History Society, Worldwide Fund for Nature India, Kerala Sastra Sahitya Parishad, Center for Science and Environment. This organization, that is Center for Science and Environment, this is the very important NGO. They play a vital role in various environmental conservation schemes in our country. So I would like to share one information about this Center for Science and Environment NGO. In 2003, this NGO was first discovered. This NGO discovered the pesticide content in the soft drinks. The first time, their business, Coke, Pepsi, was affected. The business of these people was severely affected after the release of the report from this NGO. It contained some pesticides like malathion in the soft drink. So they started the various movement, particularly the rainwater harvesting, to create awareness about among the people to conserve the rainwater. And Pani Atra was conducted by this NGO. Sunitra Narain, director this Center for Science and Environment, was awarded the World Water Prize in Stockholm in August 2005 in recognition of the work done by Center for Science and Engineering, Science and Environment for water conservation. So their movement, their ideology is, if you want to act green, first think green. So the real green revolution, according to them, is rainwater harvesting. If we harvest the rainwater, that will definitely transform the human lives. Let it change the social existence. If this happens, the world will be transformed. The world will merely be an agglomeration of ecological rainwater harvesting. So these are all their principles. So next we are going to discuss about environmental ethics. So what is environmental ethics? Why it is important? So environmental ethics is defined as it refers to the issues, principles and guidelines relating to human interactions with their environment. There are two kinds of view. One is anthropocentric view, world view. Another one is ecocentric or earth-centric world view. It all depends on how do we think and act. If we think in the anthropocentric view, so man is all powerful and the supreme creature on this earth, and man is the master of the nature and can harness it at his own will. So this environmental degradation of environment will takes place. What is earth-centric thinking? Nature has, if we think nature has provided us with all the resources for leading our beautiful life, and she nourishes us like a mother, and we should respect her and nurture her. This is earth-centric thinking. So in the anthropocentric worldview, man is powerful. He is the most important species and is the in charge of the rest of the nature. So earth has an unlimited supply of resources and it all belongs to us. Economic growth is very good, and more the growth better it is, because it raises our quality of life and potential for economic growth is unlimited. According to this anthropocentric worldview, a healthy environment depends on healthy economy. If there is a healthy economy, there will be a healthy environment. This is somewhat against the logic, right? Yes. Next, ecocentric worldview. So this is based on earth wisdom. The basic beliefs are as follows. Nature exists not for human beings alone, but for all these species. All species have equal rights as like the human beings. How the human beings have a right to live in on this mother earth, the same rights the ant species also have, some worm species also have. This is ecocentric view. Earth resources are limited and they do not belong only to human beings. The economic growth is good till it encourages earth sustaining development. If there is no if there is a good environment, there is a good economic growth. If there is no good environment, there is no economic growth. This is the ecocentric worldview. A healthy economy depends on a healthy environment. In the anthropocentric worldview, a healthy environment depends on healthy economy. Here in the earth-centric or ecocentric worldview, a healthy economy depends on a healthy environment. The success of mankind depends upon how best we can cooperate with the rest of the nature while trying to use the resources of nature for our benefit. So we can utilize, we can use the natural resources, but our use should not spoil, should not restrict, should not harm the welfare of the future generations. This is ecocentric worldview. So these are all some of the environmental ethics have to be followed. So we should love the nature. We should honor the earth since it has blessed us and guards our survival. So celebrate changing seasons. Yes, we get watermelon in the summer seasons, so we must enjoy it. So we must enjoy the seasons, winter seasons. We must enjoy summer rainy seasons. So these seasons and all we can enjoy only if there is a quality environment. If there is the environment is not good, there will be a wide seasonal variation. So during a winter season there will be a rainfall. During summer season the summer season will may be extended. We may not see the rainy season. So we celebrate the changing seasons, treat all living beings equally, and yeah, we must be grateful to the plants and animals which nourish us by giving food. So we must limit our offsprings. Yes, the major problem for environmental deterioration is the population growth. The population growth should be controlled. Should not over exploit the nature and need not produce more waste. Yes, 3R methodology should be followed. That is in order to reduce the waste generation. Reduce, recycle and reuse methodology can be followed. That is 3Rs. Should not steal from the future generations rights. So sustainable development is necessary. Next one, Wildlife Protection Act. So the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. I would like to share one information why this Wildlife Protection Act was brought in the year 1972. Why we are celebrating the World Environmental Day as June 5. Why we are not celebrating the World Environmental Day as in June 6. The entire world is celebrating the World Environmental Day on June 5, right? There should be some reason. What is the reason? So 48 years back, June 5, 1972, there was one conference in Stockholm. That was the first conference discussed about the environmental problems. So before 1972, people exploited the nature at their own will. In 1972, Sweden was the first country organized a conference in Stockholm regarding the environmental issues. On behalf of our country, our then Prime Minister Srimati Indira Gandhi participated in that conference. She made a remarkable lecture in that conference. She was instrumental in introducing the concept of environmental protection in the Constitution of India as a fundamental duty. When she came from, soon after she came from Stockholm, she brought this Wildlife Protection Act 1972 in the Parliament. So laws and all, environmental laws are laws, nothing to explain. Say for example, we must walk on the left. So we cannot raise a question, why do we want to make a walk on the left? The laws are framed by us for our benefit. Likewise, these laws are framed by us, by our constitution, for our environmental benefit. So nothing to explain in these laws. So then and there, so you must go through all the points given in the slides. So then and there I add a few points for your better understanding, right? Nothing to explain in the laws. That's what I would like to emphasize here. Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So in this act, the Indian Board of Wildlife, even though it was created in the year 1952, so this came into existence in the year 1972. So this law defines the wildlife related terminology. It provides for the appointment of wildlife advisory board, wildlife wardens, their powers, duties, etc. Restriction and prohibition of hunting and trapping of wildlife. So it provides the rehabilitation of endangered and threatened species. So it gives definition. This law gives a clear-cut definitions. What is endangered species, what is endemic species, what is threatened species, what is a rare species. All those species are clearly defined in this law. Before bringing this law, there was no proper definitions what is endangered species. So many wild animals were hunted by the public. The Act provides for setting up of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, etc. So grant of special permit to hunt a wildlife for scientific research, scientific management and collection of specimens for zoological gardens, museums, etc. The Act imposes a ban on the trade or commerce in scheduled animals. There is a provision for trade and commerce in some wild species with license for sale. It provides legal powers to the officers and punishment to the offenders. The major drawback. So this law was brought as a fallout of Stockholm Conference held in 1972, as I said before. Merely bringing laws that could not be useful, because the laws cannot change the law. Mere laws cannot change our country, cannot change the public views. So, this law fails to include the local people. So this law does not give any environmental awareness, creation of awareness among the local people. Another drawback is the there are before a few months before, the Jammu and Kashmir was merged to our complete that was the rights of Jammu and Kashmir. Article, what is that article? I forgot it. The Jammu and Kashmir was joined in our country. So it had a separate laws. The Jammu and Kashmir, this hunting is allowed. The rest of the countries, hunting of the wild animals are prohibited. Now nowadays, this entire country, a single same law, only one law is followed. So this problem is rectified nowadays. But the past, the people, the hunters hunt the wild animals and they sell the wild animals products through the Jammu and Kashmir to the European countries. The punishment is given to the hunters is very low. 6 months imprisonment, 1,000 or 2,000 rupees penalty. These are all the major challenges for enforcing this law successfully. Another one is Water Pollution and Control Act. Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974. It provides for maintaining and restoring the water resources. It defines what is water pollution, what is contamination, what is the allowed limit of water pollutants in the water, etc. The salient features and provisions of the Act are summed up as follows. The Act provides for maintenance and restoration of quality of all types of surface and groundwater. It provides for the establishment of central and state pollution control board. The Act assigns powers and functions to these boards to control pollution. The central and state pollution control boards are given comprehensive powers to advise, coordinate, and provide technical assistance for prevention and control of water pollution. The Act has provisions for funds, budgets, accounts, and audit of the central and state pollution control boards. The Act prohibits the disposal of any poisonous, noxious, or polluting matter to the flow of water or in a stream. However, dumping of any material into a stream for the purpose of reclamation of land is not considered an offence. Functions of Central Pollution Control Board. Next we are going to discuss functions of State Pollution Control Board. Central Pollution Control Board advises the central government regarding the environmental pollution, particularly water pollution. They coordinate the activities of State Pollution Control Board. They framed and the all threshold limit or all permissible limits of air pollutants or water pollutants in the environment. Collects, compiles and publishes technical and statistical data related to pollution, prepares manuals for treatment and disposal of sewage and trade effluents, establishes laboratories for the analysis of water, sewage or trade effluent samples. Functions of State Pollution Control Board. So let me have a cup of water, please. State Pollution Control Board has similar functions to be executed at the state level and are governed by the directions of Central Pollution Control Board. So this State Pollution Control Board would receive the comments comments and suggestions of the Central Pollution Control Board. They would act upon them. State Pollution Control Board advises the state government with respect to the location of any industry. It lays the standards for effluents entering into the water bodies. The state board has powers to obtain information to take samples of effluents. So what is the major challenge here is, if you take Central Pollution Control Board or State Pollution Control Board, if any company violates the norms, they can the pollution control the people from the Central Pollution Control Board or State Pollution Control Board can directly enter into the company and they can inspect the quality or pollution system, the pollution prevention system adopting in that company. But if they violate the pollution control board can file a case in the court. The court proceedings and all the time consuming process, they have no power to take a direct action. So that is the major problem. A person empowered by the board has a right to enter, inspect and examine any plant, record, register, document or any other material object. As I said before, the board has the powers to restructure the outlets of dumping pollutants. The board suggests efficient methods for utilization, treatment and disposal of trade effluents. Technical difficulties in controlling the water pollution. These boards, either the state pollution control board and central pollution control board, they require money. The money was generated by introducing a new tax called water cess. Now the money is not a problem. By this act, they are generating the money. But as I said before, they have no power to take action against the erring party. The court procedures, as I said before, that is time consuming, that delays the often prevent quick and preventive action, thereby defeating the sole purpose of the act. So various states are seeking the amendments. So this the implementation of this act is depending on the state governments. Certain state governments are reluctant to strictly strictly implement these laws. That is another challenge. Next, Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. The salient features of this act as follows. The act provides prevention, control and abatement of air pollution, and this Air Act was passed under Article 253 of the Constitution of India in pursuance of decisions of Stockholm Conference. The objective of this act is to provide means for the prevention, control and abatement of air pollution in order to preserve the quality of air. The act defines the pollutants, what is air pollution, air pollutants, etc. So the rest of the things you go through. The similar things, what are the things we discussed in the water prevention and control of pollution, the same salient features are given in this act as well. Another act, Environment Protection Act 1986. So it is often called as Umbrella Act. So by combining the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act and the Air Prevention Control of Pollution Act 1981. So this law was brought in the year 1986. The Prime Minister by the then Prime Minister Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. The standard of quality of air, water and soil for various areas for various purposes, maximum permissive limits are prescribed. Procedures and safeguards for handling of hazardous substances, procedures providing remedial measures in the case of accidents, etc. So, Environmental Protection Act is a landmark legislation to provide single focus in the country for the protection of environment and to plug the loopholes in the earlier laws. In the earlier laws, there was some loopholes. This law was brought to overcome those loopholes. This act ensures enforcement of several acts, regulations concerning pollution control. So, Umbrella Act that I have told you earlier, this act confers powers to the central government take all such measures as it deems necessary for the purpose of protecting and improving the quality of the environment preventing, controlling, and abating the environmental pollution. So, issue directions for the closure, prohibition, or regulation of any industry, operations, and process, and for the stoppage or regulations of the supply of water, power, or any other service, even without obtaining court orders. You know, in the other acts that we have discussed, air prevention and control of pollution, the water prevention and control of pollution. So in these acts, so you can file a case in the court against the violators, but here this law provides the power for the government itself can take the action. Establish or recognize environmental laboratories and appoint government analysts. Prohibit industrial emission or discharge of environmental pollutants over and above the limits stipulated by the relevant standards. Any person can make a complaint of violation of provisions of the Act to the central government or authority or officers authorized for this purpose. The Act prescribes stringent penalties to the defaulters for violation of the provisions of the Act. The state pollution control boards have to follow guidelines provided under Schedule 6 of Environmental Protection Act 1986. Some of the points are given here. They have to advise the industries for treating the wastewater and gases with the best technology to achieve the prescribed standards. The industries have to encourage for recycling and recovery of biogas, energy, and reusable materials. The central and state boards have to emphasize on the implementation of clean green technologies by the industries to reduce the generation of pollutants. That's all about the laws. Dear students, nothing to explain about the laws, so you can go through the materials that I have sent to your mail earlier. The one law must be asked in the examination. So 4 laws we have discussed, that is Wildlife Protection Act 1972 and Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974, the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981, the Environmental Protection Act 1986. We have discussed, actually this law and all has a bound volume. For the examination point of view, we have discussed only the salient features, so you must gone through. Any one of the laws must be asked in the examination. That is a definite question in every semester examinations. They ask one law. Okay, that may be in the 15 marks part or in the 8 marks or 7 marks subdivisions. So with this, unit 4 is over. So we have discussed unit 4 without omitting a single bit. I hope you have studied all the topics in the 4th unit. So you must be ready to write the examinations that may be conducted in June or last week of June or July or August, that I don't know exactly, but you should be ready. If the examination is conducted, so you should be ready to face it. Okay, so unit 4 you must have you must write a test. So in the if there is a classroom teaching, I would conduct various tests in the class itself. So unfortunately I could not conduct the class tests here, so I would conduct the online tests. You can expect the online test soon. Okay, be ready to write the test. So you must study the entire 4th unit The test date I will tell you later. Thank you.